glanced up involuntarily. Somewhere, above our head, the lone master of this grim house was stretched out in his last sleep, silent, his white face set in a grinning mask of death. Panic swept over me and I fought for control. After all, it was merely the corpse of a wicked old man who was past harming anyone. This argument rang hollowly in my brain like the words of a frightened child who is trying to reassure himself. I turned to Conrad. He had taken a time-yellowed envelope from an inside pocket. "This," he said, removing from the envelope several pages of a closely written, time-yellowed parchment, "is, in effect, the last word of John Grimlin, though God alone knows how many years ago it was written. He gave it to me 10 years ago, immediately after his return from Mongolia. It was shortly after this that he had his first seizure. This envelope he gave me, sealed, and he made me swear that I would hide it carefully and that I would not open it until he was dead. When I was to read the contents and follow their directions exactly. More, he made me swear that no matter what he said or did after giving me the envelope, I would go ahead as first directed. For," he said with a fearful smile, "the flesh is weak, but I am a man of my word, and though I might, in a moment of weakness, wish to retract, it is far, far too late now. You may never understand the matter, but you are to do as I have said." "Well?" "Well," again Conrad wiped his brow. Tonight, as he lay writhing in his death agonies, his wordless howls were mingled with frantic admonitions to bring to him the envelope and destroy it before his eyes. As he yammered this, he forced himself up on his elbows, and with eyes staring and hair standing straight up on his head, he screamed at me in a manner to chill the blood. As he was shrieking for me to destroy the envelope, not to open it, and once he howled in his delirium for me to hew his body into pieces and scatter the bits to the four winds of heaven, an uncontrollable exclamation of horror escaped my dry lips. "At last," went on Conrad, "I gave in. Remembering his commands 10 years ago, I at first stood firm, but at last, as his screeches grew unbearably desperate, I turned to go for the envelope, even though that meant leaving him alone. But as I turned, with one last fearful convulsion, in which blood-flecked foam flew from his writhing lips, the life went from his twisted body in a single great wrench." He fumbled at the parchment. "I'm going to carry out my promise. The directions herein seem fantastic and may be the whims of a disordered mind, but I gave my word. They are, briefly, that I place his corpse on the great black ebony table in his library, with 7 black candles burning about him. The doors and windows are to be firmly closed and fastened. Then, in the darkness which precedes dawn, I am to read the formula, charm, or spell which is contained in a smaller sealed envelope inside the first, and which I have not yet opened." "But is that all?" I cried. "No provisions as to the disposition of his fortune, his estate, or his corpse?" "Nothing. In his will, which I have seen elsewhere, he leaves estate and fortune to a certain Oriental gentleman named in the document as Malaktos." "What?" I cried, shaken to my soul. "Conrad, this is madness heaped on madness. Malaktos! Good God, no mortal man was ever so named. That is the title of the foul god worshipped by the mysterious Yezidis. They of Mount Alamount the Accursed, whose 8 brazen towers rise in the mysterious waste of deep Asia. His idolatrous symbol is the brazen peacock, and the Mohammedans, who hate his demon-worshipping devotees, say he is the essence of the evil of all the universes, the prince of darkness, Ahriman, the old serpent, the veritable Satan. And you say Gremlin names this mythical demon in his will?" "It is the truth." Conrad's throat was dry. "And look, he has scribbled a strange line at the corner of this parchment. 'Dig me no grave. I shall not need one.'" Again, a chill wandered down my spine. In God's name, I cried in a kind of frenzy. Let us get this incredible business over with. I think a drink might help, answered Conrad, moistening his lips. It seems to me I've seen Gremlin go into this cabinet for wine. He bent to the door of an ornately carved mahogany cabinet, and after some difficulty, opened it. No wine here, he said disappointedly, and if I ever felt the need of stimulants... What's this? He drew out a roll of parchment, dusty, yellowed, half covered with spider webs. Everything in that grim house seemed, to my nervously excited sentence, fraught with mysterious meaning and import, and I leaned over his shoulder as he unrolled it. It's a record of peerage, he said, such a chronicle of births, deaths, and so forth as the old families used to keep in the 16th century and earlier. What's the name? I asked. He scowled over the dim scrawls, striving to master the faded, archaic script. I got it. Gremlin, of course. It's the records of old John's family, the Gremlins of Toad's Heath Manor, Suffolk. What an outlandish name for an estate. Look at the last entry. Together we read, John Gremlin, born March 10, 1630. And then we both cried out. Under this entry was freshly written, in a strange, scrawling hand, died March 10, 1930. Below this, there was a seal of black wax, stamped with a strange design, something like a peacock with a spreading tail. Conrad stared at me speechless. All the color ebbed from his face. I shook myself with the rage engendered by fear. It's the hoax of a madman, I shouted. The stage has been set with such great care that the actors have overstepped themselves. Whoever they are, they have heaped up so many incredible effects as to nullify them. It's all a very stupid, very dull drama of illusion. And even as I spoke, icy sweat stood out on my body, and I shook as with a wordless motion, Conrad turned toward the stairs, taking up a large candle from a mahogany table. It was understood, I suppose, he whispered, that I should go through with this ghastly matter alone. But I had not the moral courage, and now I'm glad I had not. A still horror brooded over the silent house as we went up the stairs. A faint breeze stole in from somewhere and set the heavy velvet hangings rustling. I visualized stealthy, taloned fingers drawing alongside the tapestries to fix red, gloating eyes upon us. Once I thought I heard the indistinct clumping of monstrous feet somewhere above us, but it must have been the heavy pounding of my own heart. The stairs debouched into a wide, dark corridor, in which our feeble candle cast a faint gleam which but illuminated our pale faces and made the shadows seem darker by comparison. We stopped at a heavy door, and I heard Conrad's breath drawn sharply as a man's will when he braces himself physically or mentally. I involuntarily clenched my fists until the nails bit into the palms. Then Conrad thrust the door open. A sharp cry escaped his lips. The candle drooped from his nerveless fingers and went out. The library of John Gremlin was ablaze with light, though the whole house had been in darkness when we entered it. The light came from 7 black candles, placed at regular intervals about the great ebony table. On this table, between the candles, I had braced myself against the sight. Now, in the face of the mysterious illumination, and the sight of the thing on the table, my resolution nearly gave way. John Gremlin had been unlovely in life. In death, he was hideous. Yes, he was hideous, even though his face was mercifully covered with the same curious silken robe, which, worked in fantastic bird-like designs, covered his whole body except the crooked claw-like hands and the bare, withered feet. A strangling sound came from Conrad. I God, he whispered. What is this? I laid his body out on the table and placed the candles about it, but I did not light them, nor did I place that robe over his body, and there were bedroom slippers on his feet when I left. He halted suddenly. We were not alone in the death room. At first we had not seen him, as he sat in the great armchair in a farther nook of a corner, so still that he seemed a part of the shadows cast by the heavy tapestries. As my eyes fell upon him, a violent shuddering shook me, and a feeling akin to nausea racked the pit of my stomach. My first impression was of vivid, oblique yellow eyes, which gazed unwinkingly at us. Then the man rose and made a deep salaam, and we saw that he was an Oriental. Now, when I strive to etch him clearly in my mind, I can resurrect no plain image of him. I only remember those piercing eyes and the yellow, fantastic robe he wore. We returned his salute mechanically, and he spoke in a low, refined voice. Gentlemen, I crave your pardon. I have made so free as to light the candles. Shall we not proceed with the business pertaining to our mutual friend? He made a slight gesture toward the silent bulk on the table. Conrad nodded, evidently unable to speak. The thought flashed through our minds at the same time that this man had also been given a sealed envelope. But how he had come to the Gremlin house so quickly. John Gremlin had been dead scarcely 2 hours, and to the best of our knowledge, no one knew of his demise but ourselves. And how had he gotten into the locked and bolted house? The whole affair was grotesque and unreal in the extreme. We did not even introduce ourselves or ask the stranger his name. He took charge in a matter-of-fact way, and so under the spell of horror and illusion we moved dazedly, involuntarily obeying his suggestions, given us in a low, respectful tone. I found myself standing on the left side of the table, looking across its grisly burden at Conrad. The Oriental stood with arms folded and head bowed at the head of the table, nor did it then strike me as being strange that he should stand there, instead of Conrad, who was to read what Gremlin had written. I found my gaze drawn to the figure, and worked on the breast of the stranger's robe in black silk, a curious figure, somewhat resembling a peacock and somewhat resembling a bat or a flying dragon. I noted with a start that the same design was worked on the robe covering the corpse. The doors had been locked, the windows fastened down. Conrad, with a shaky hand, opened the inner envelope and fluttered open the parchment sheets contained therein. These sheets seemed much older than those containing the instructions to Conrad in the larger envelope. Conrad began to read in a monotonous drone, which had the effect of hypnosis on the hearer. So at times the candles grew dim in my gaze, and the room and its occupants swam strange and monstrous, veiled and distorted like an hallucination. Most of what he read was gibberish. It meant nothing, yet the sound of it and the archaic style of it filled me with an intolerable horror. To ye contract elsewhere recorded, I, John Gremlin, hereby swear by ye name of ye nameless one to keep good faith. Wherefore do I now write in blood these words spoken to me in this grim and silent chamber, in ye dead city of Koth, whereto no mortal man hath attained but me. These same words now writ down by me, to be read over my body, and ye appointed time to fulfill my part of ye bargain, which I entered into of mine own free will, and knowledge being of right mind, and 50 years of age this year of 1680 A.D. Here beginneth ye incantation. Before man was, ye elder ones were, and even yet their Lord dwelleth among ye shadows, to which, if a man set his foot, he may not turn upon his track. The words merged into a barbaric gibberish as Conrad stumbled through an unfamiliar language, a language faintly suggesting the Phoenician, but shuddery with the touch of a hideous antiquity beyond any remembered earthly tongue. One of the candles flickered and went out. I made a move to relight it, but emotion from the silent Oriental stayed me. His eyes burned into mine, then shifted back to the still form on the table. The manuscript had shifted back into archaic English. And ye mortal which gaineth to ye black citadels of Koth, and speaks with ye dark lord, whose face is hidden, for a price may he gain his heart's desire, riches and knowledge beyond counting, and life beyond mortal span, even 250 years. Again, Conrad's voice trailed off into unfamiliar gutturals. Another candle went out. Let not ye mortal flinch, as ye time draweth nigh for payment, and ye fires of hell lay hold upon ye. Vitals is the sign of reckonage. For ye prince of darkness taketh his due in ye end, and he is not to be cozened. What ye have promised, that shall ye deliver. Agatha Neshaba. At the first sound of those barbaric accents, a cold hand of terror locked up my throat. My frantic eyes shot to the candles, and I was not surprised to see another flicker out. Yet there was no hint of any draft to stir the heavy black hangings. Conrad's voice wavered. He drew his hand across his throat, gagging momentarily. The eyes of the Oriental never altered. Among ye sons of men glide strange shadows forever. Men see ye tracks of ye talons, but not ye feet that make them. Over ye souls of men spread great black wings. There is but one black master, though men called him Satanus and Beelzebub and Apollyon and Ottermon and Malektos. Mists of horror engulfed me. I was dimly aware of Conrad's voice droning on, but in English and in that other fearsome tongue, whose horrific import I scarcely dared try to guess. And with stark fear clutching at my heart, I saw the candles go out, one by one, and with each flicker, as the gathering gloom darkened about us, my horror mounted. I could not speak. I could not move. My distended eyes were fixed with agonized intensity on the remaining candle. The silent Oriental, at the head of that ghastly table, was included in my fear. He had not moved nor spoken, but under his drooping lids, his eyes burned with devilish triumph. I knew that beneath his inscrutable exterior, he was gloating fiendishly. But why? Why? But I knew that the moment the extinguishing of the last candle plunged the room into utter darkness, some nameless, abominable thing would take place. Conrad was approaching the end. His voice rose to the climax in gathering crescendo. Approacheth now, ye moment of payment. Ye ravens are flying. Ye bats' wings against ye sky. There are skulls in ye stars. Your soul and your body are promised and shall be delivered up. Not to ye dust again, nor ye elements from which spring life. The candle flickered slightly. I tried to scream, but my mouth gaped to a soundless yammering. I tried to flee, but I stood frozen, unable to even close my eyes. Ye abyss yawns, and ye debt is in pay. Ye light fades, ye shadows gather. There is no God but evil, no light but darkness, no hope but doom. A hollow groan resounded through the room. It seemed to come from the robe-covered thing on the table. That robe twitched fitfully. Oh, wings in ye black dark. I started violently. A faint swish sounded in the gathering shadows. The stir of the dark hangings. This sounded like the rustle of gigantic wings. Oh, red eyes in ye shadows. What is promised, what is written in blood is fulfilled. Ye light is gulfed in blackness. Yah, Koth. The last candle went out suddenly, and a ghastly, unhuman cry that came not from my lips or from Conrad's burst unbearably forth. Horror swept over me like a black, icy wave. In the blind dark, I heard myself screaming terribly. Then, with a swirl and a great rush of wind, something swept the room, flinging the hangings aloft and dashing chairs and tables crashing to the floor. For an instant, an intolerable odor burned our nostrils. A low, hideous tittering mocked us in the blackness. Then silence fell like a shroud. Somehow, Conrad found a candle and lighted it. The faint glow showed us the room in fearful disarray, showed us each other's ghastly faces, and showed us the black ebony table, empty. The doors and windows were locked as they had been, but the Oriental was gone, and so was the corpse of John Grimlin. Shrieking like damned men, we broke down the door and fled frenziedly down the well-lit staircase, where the darkness seemed to clutch at us with clammy black fingers. As we tumbled down into the lower hallway, a lurid glow cut the darkness, and the scent of burning wood filled our nostrils. The outer doorway held momentarily against our frantic assault, then gave way, and we hurtled into the outer starlight. Behind us, the flames leapt up with a crackling roar as we fled down the hill. Conrad, glancing over his shoulder, halted suddenly, wheeled, and flung up his arms like a madman and screamed. Soul and body he sold to Malaktaus, who was Satan 250 years ago. This was the night of payment, and my God, look, look, the fiend has claimed his own. I looked, frozen with horror. Flames had enveloped the whole house with appalling swiftness, and now the great mass was etched against the shadowed sky, a crimson inferno. And above the Holocaust hovered a gigantic black shadow like a monstrous bat, and from its dark clutch dangled a small white thing, like the body of a man, dangling limply. Then, even as we cried out in horror, it was gone, and our dazed gaze met only the shuddering walls and blazing roof, which crumbled into the flames of an earth-shaking roar. The end. Well, that was pretty awesome.